Well, howdy folks, welcome to another THSS Tech video. We're going to be doing Aseprite today and our intro to that. So this might be your first time using the program, so let's just open it up for the first time on our computers. All you need to do is click the Windows button on the corner and start typing Aseprite or A-S-E. There it is there. We're going to open it. And Aseprite is a pixel art program. We talked about pixel art programs in our class. This one is a very simple pixel art editor. And we will be making some landscapes and animations in this program. I'm going to start with a very simple landscape today. And so let's do that one together. So shouldn't have anything on here. Don't bother updating Aseprite here. We're going to go new file, create a new one here. The default is 32 by 32. If I just hit OK, in order to zoom in here, I'm going to use the mouse wheel, and it's very small on the screen because we're doing pixel art. So pixel art means that each pixel of our monitor is roughly the size of a pixel that we're going to create, and we can start drawing it, one pixel at a time. We're using the brush tool over here, and we can go ahead and, draw a nice little happy face. I'm happy to be using this program. I'm going to reselect yellow up here, go to the paint drop bucket tool on the side here, and we've made a happy face. Isn't that nice? Go ahead and press the eraser button, the second one down, and we can erase the face because we're not going to be making faces today. Instead, like I said, we're going to be making a landscape. So your first project is going to be a landscape. So we're going to go ahead and make the first panel of the landscape here by going File, New. And we're going to make our file 64 by 64. Your true assignment is going to be 4 landscape pictures in sort of a big strip. So it's actually going to be 256 by 64. That's 4 times 64. But we are going to start with the 64 by 64 just so we get the idea of the program. Again, you're going to be creating a 256 by 64 file, but we're going to do 64 by 64 for this video. And I can press OK here, and we have a slightly bigger thing. I'm going to zoom into it. Hold the middle mouse button here to pan around. You can also pan by pressing space and moving it around. We'll just move it up here. We have our work to draw on. I'm going to go back to the pencil tool here, and I'm going to start by drawing our lovely Golden Ears Mountains just outside the windows, the Golden Ears Mountains. So I'll take my gray brush here, and I will start by drawing what sort of looks like the Golden Ears Mountains. It's hard to see, isn't it, with this background here? So we're going to take a brush and make the brush a little bit bigger, blobbier. I'm going to hit Control-Z on the keyboard to go back a step. I'm going to go to the brush tool there, and I'm going to make the brush 5. Now you can see the brush tool a little bit better on the screen. Select gray here. And we're going to make a Golden Ears Mountains. Okay. Can't really see them, can you? That's a real shame there. So we're going to fill with the fill bucket tool here, the bottom of the mountains there. And then in order to make it actually visible, we're going to add some sky. So let's go to blue here, go back to the paint bucket tool, and we'll fill the sky. Now we can see them there. And we can go ahead back to the gray that we'd selected before. If you go back to the same color you selected, you can hold down the Alt key that pulls out the eyedropper, and then click anywhere on the brush tool. And we can, make these mountains a little bit better. Now that I look at these mountains, I think they're a little bit, too much in the center of the frame. So I'm going to move them down a little bit by clicking on this Move tool here. 4-pointed arrow is a move tool, and I'm going to click and hold and move them down. But look what's happening at the top here. There was nothing there. So there is a way that we can move just the mountains and not the sky in the background. There's a couple ways to do it, but what we want to start to be using is layers. So we're going to use the layer option and put the mountains just on a layer. So I'm going to go back before I added that sky there by hitting Control-Z, 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 just so we can get back to where we had the sky there. And the mountains are on a layer. You can see at the top here, we have the option to add layers under the layer on the menu bar here. So I'm gonna hit layer, I'm gonna hit new, I'm gonna hit new layer, and you can see it gives us these options of the layers here at the bottom. So we're gonna move this slightly, holding the middle mouse button down there. And we're gonna call this first layer by double clicking on it. We're gonna call it something like mountain. There we go. And we're gonna give this new layer a name, sky. Okay, so we're gonna draw the sky. So we're gonna make sure we're on the sky layer here. And we're gonna go up to blue again, go to our drop tool there, our paint bucket, and we're gonna drop, oh no, we've erased our mountains. Now, keen students, remember this from before we talked about layers in Photoshop, but you can see here on our layer panel, the sky is on top of the mountain. And we want it the opposite way around. So we have to move this sky layer to the bottom of our layers because everything's gonna be layered on top of the sky. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna click on the sky layer, make sure it's selected there. And then if we hover the mouse very carefully right over the side there, right over the edge of the two layers, it'll change the icon on the cursor to an arrow and then the move tool, which is what we want. I'm not doing anything on a keyboard or anything like that. I'm just moving the mouse to the correct place between the two layers. So if I have the layer selected, I have the new tool, the move tool, I can click and hold and drag the sky to the bottom. And now it pops the mountain on top of that layer. Now I want to make some adjustments to my mountains because they look a little weird. So I'm going to click back on my mountain layer, click on my brush tool, hold down Alt to select the gray, and I'll start to rebrush my mountains so they look a little nicer. There we go, that's getting there. And now I can move my move tool and add a bit more sky. Okay, but it's kind of a boring sky, you might think. You might want to add a little more pizzazz to your sky, such as multiple colors. Let's pretend that there's a sunrise or sunset going on behind these mountains instead of this blue sky. So instead of a fill bucket tool, I'm going to select the second tool. If I click on hold on the drop tool on the side here, there's a tool underneath it called the gradient tool. The shortcut key is there too, Shift G. If I click on that, I can create a gradient, but I need to set up the gradient first. And if you look at our color palette over here to this side, you can see that the color we've selected has this black triangle on it. If I select a different color, it selects a triangle on the upper left. And you can see there's another triangle on this color here. And that we can select more than one color by using the other mouse button. So if I click on the left mouse button for one color and the right mouse button for the other, you can see it has the triangle on the upper top left and now the bottom right. And that way we can select more than one color for our sky. You can see them both down here as well. And that is creating a gradient now between those two colors. And with the gradient tool selected on the correct layer, the sky layer, I can click and drag, and you can see it's creating that thing. I'm holding the mouse button down, dragging it across. Okay, you can give that a try. I'm gonna press Control Z and try again from this side. Can make it that layer. So it depends on the angle you start with. Okay, I'm going to do something more like from the top, slightly angled to the side here, and pull it down over here. And you can see that gradient there. Zoom out, it looks real nice. And then you can start to see where the sun might be setting. The sun is going to be setting here on the bottom right. So the bottom right is going to be our brightest area. And then the top left is going to be our darker area. We can imagine what the mountains are gonna look like in that, okay? But we've got a couple problems here. When we go to look at the shading of this mountain here, there's not a lot available in gray. There's just these shades, and some of these, like this is a warm shade of gray, this is a cold shade of gray, so it's not the best color palette. There's not a lot available here. So we're gonna change our color palette to make a better color palette. And by doing that, we're going to go to this folder up here of presets. Presets folder contains lots of different color panels. If I just click on that there, it opens up a whole panel of different palettes, and I can scroll down. And the one I recommend you use is the Google UI one, because if I double click on that, you can see, I click anywhere else, it's loaded up and it looks like the shading is done for you. Each one of the primary colors here has a bunch of shades. And now if I click on a gray, a sort of neutral gray color here, let's just reshade the middle of the mountain, this gray color here with the bucket tool. There we go. That's that one. Oh, I'm on the sky layer. Mountain layer there. There we go. And now I can go with my brush tool and start to shade the mountain. Like I said, we want it brighter on this side. To turn down my brush size a little bit. Brighter on this side here, where the sun would be setting. Okay, and if I go too far, I can just go to the erase, click the end here, make it a bit more peaky. Back to my brush. The shortcut key for that is B for brush and E for eraser. That's easy to remember. Okay, and we want to make it so that we have a little bit of a shade here, and we can go even one brighter for the very top of the mountain peaks here, right? And then we can go darker for the other side. That's still brighter. That's our neutral color. So one darker is the next row down. The other side of the mountain here is going to have this dark gray. Same with this side. Down into the valley, so we're creating a distance. And you can actually, spend some time making some terrain for your mountain. I'm going to go to a slightly smaller brush, add some terrain, then I come back and go to my other shades on my palette there, and we can start shading the sides of the terrain we created, making it seem like the mountain sort of has that 3D look. And you might be like, oh, it doesn't look great. And you'd be right, because I'm not an amazing artist. But if you look at our preview panel here, in this little window, it shows us what the mountain would look like from a little bit farther away, which is usually the way we look at pixel art. We usually look at pixel art from a bit further away. It's not meant to be really up close. So it kind of looks weird sometimes up close, but it's just what we're doing. I'm going to do this little valley here in much darker color, and some darkness to the sides here where the light will not fall. The shadiest place, of course, of the Golden Ears Mountains where we live here, the shadiest place is the town of Maple Ridge, where we all call home. All right, so we got, I could spend a long time doing this, but I'm going to spend forever doing this because I want to teach you some more things. So imagine I spent a long time doing this, but you will be, and sort of mixing it up, making it nice. I'm going to come back to the sky here. I'm going to just turn off the mountain. So you can turn off a layer by clicking on the eyeball, making it hidden. You can see I accidentally started to draw on the sky layer there. So I'm going to go to my sky layer, and then going to select with the brush tool the sort of colors next to this here, and just put this back to where it was. My mistake. Okay, unnoticeable. Now what I'm going to say is, for pixel art, if I turn back on the mountains, like my edges are much more harsh, and that's the way often I like to make pixel art. I like to use harsher edges, and our sky layer is a nice soft gradient between these two colors. So I actually want to jumble it up a little bit to make it less soft, make it look like more of a style that I would be used to. So I'm going to turn off the mountain layer, and I'm going to go to this very last tool in my toolbar here on the right, click and hold, and we've got something called the Jingle, Jangle, Jumble tool. It just says Jumble tool, but that's just a short name for the Jingle, Jangle, Jumble tool. So then I click that or press R, and then it's going to be a giant brush here. And if I click, you can see it starts to mix up randomly these two colors. To me, I just like that better. I think it creates a kind of a nicer look. So smudges everything together. And I like that look a little bit better. If I turn back on the mountain, I think it blends better into what we're trying to do here rather than a really soft gradient. But a lot of pixel art is just personal choice, so it's up to you. If I went back to the mountain layer and did that, because there's nothing there, I'm sort of just exploding my mountains out there. So it's actually, you know, kind of maybe less useful for the edges of an object. You kind of want a full color everywhere to do that. I could do it along these little bits of terrain here. Maybe you like that look, or maybe you don't. I just Control Z'd all that, undid it. So I'm liking this. It's looking pretty good. But again, if I look outside at the Golden Ears Mountains here, there's a lot of trees as well. I don't see any trees up here. So let's go and add some trees. And of course, we're going to add trees in their own layer. So new layer. And we're going to call that layer trees. Okay. And then for trees, I'm going to select a green. But I'm not going to paint the trees on with the brush tool because, you know, it just doesn't look very good. So I'm going to make it sort of random again, because adding some randomness is a good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and under my pencil tool, there's a spray can. So I'm going to hit that spray can there. And instead of 1 pixel, you can see it's going to spray everywhere. Now that's not really helpful because that's really too big. So we're going to turn down the spray width to something a bit more manageable. Sure, 5. You can turn down the speed. That's how quickly it comes out of the can. Turn that down there. I can press undo again. And then I can start to spray. Probably coming out of the can a bit too fast again. So I'll turn that down. There we go. That's a bit more manageable. And I'll spray some trees at the bottom here. And if I use different greens, I sort of get a nice little forest look here. Go, you know, highlight tone here, especially near the bottom. Spray off to the bottom. And then I can take a real dark look here for some of it. You know, just kind of like that a little bit. Depends on how you like things. But again, down the preview window, it looks a little nicer down here. And again, if I was doing this for class, I would be spending the 3 to 5 to 6 to 10 hours that we're asking you to do, but this is just a little sample for you. So that's looking pretty good. Now we could soften the differences between these greens a little bit by using another tool here. Again, we're on the trees layer here. And if you go back to the Jingle, Jangle, Jumble tool and click and hold on that one, there's a tool called the blur tool. So go to the blur tool here and very gently sort of blur this. Now that's a little bit much for my taste. It's too blurry, so I'm going to Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, bring it back, and I'm going to turn down the opacity and then try to blur it a little bit, and it just sort of softens those peaks behind the mountains, and sorry, the amount of forest there blends it into the mountains. You might like that look better. You could do that several times. You can come back to the spray paint, spray another layer on there now that you've blurred that in there, and we're looking pretty good for forest, especially if you look on here. Okay, that's up to you, the amount of detail you want to put into that. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. If I zoom out, that's looking nice. Okay, maybe go back to our mountains layer here, go back to our brush. Maybe we want to add a little more detail here, here. You know, can't hurt. Make it a little more like that. I use Control Z all the time when I'm doing this kind of thing here, just to make things easier for me. I don't know what looks better, but I think that's slightly better. It could take a while. I mean, I can go really bright with this mountain here, come all the way up to like these grays up here, add almost a snow peak to the top of the mountain if I wanted to. Make sure you're on the right layer when you're doing that. So if I hide the mountain, the forest is going to hang out there. Really useful to work in layers. Speaking of layers, let's add one more layer. So if you know what biome we live in, on the count of 3, tell me what biome you live in. 1, 2, 3. You said temperate rainforest, of course. So we live in a temperate rainforest. So of course, rain comes from clouds. Let's add a cloud or two using the pencil tool. Going back to a really light color here. We're going to do it in a new layer, of course. New layer. Call that one clouds. And I want to move the clouds layer to above the trees so we can put clouds on top of the trees. And then we can just start drawing some clouds. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger here. And, you know, however you'd want to draw clouds. You can make them harsh or you can make them soft, but these clouds are really darn white, aren't they? Cover up like the top. We worked so hard on that shading, worked so hard on that jingle, jangle, jumble gradient, but now our clouds are basically covering everything up. So maybe there's a way that we can get these clouds to blend in a little bit better that we haven't talked about yet. We could hit it with the Jingle Jangle Jumble tool, but that doesn't work. We could hit it with the blur tool, but that sort of fuzzes the edges, which looks okay. It's not exactly what I'm going for. Instead, I'm going to double click on the cloud layer, and instead of 255 opacity, I'm going to turn that opacity. I'm just going to move this window aside so you can see. I'm going to turn down the opacity, and you can see as I turn down the opacity, you can start to see behind the clouds. So maybe a combination of those two things. I'm going to turn down the opacity, and then we'll come in, we'll hit the edges with the blur tool a little bit, and I think that looks pretty good. I like where we're going with this. Now we're living in Maple Ridge, which is where we want to be. I can, while I'm on the cloud layer here, use the move tool and just really carefully place the clouds where I might want them to be, so I don't get in the way of something. I like that a little bit better. And now we are good to go. So let's save our file. So we're going to go File, Save As up here. And then we are going to choose My Computer with this little drop-down window here where it says This PC. Go to This PC. And we're going to go into the Tech New NAS folder, our Media Design 910 class, and then find our class and find our pixel art folder and just save it in there. Okay, I'll let you do that on your own because I don't want to show everyone's names to the whole internet. But that's all we got for you today. This awesome mountain scene we made there. Make sure you save it. And like I said, your actual assignment is a strip of 4 of the 64 by 64 scenes done 4 ways. See your teacher for help on that one. Good night, everybody.